All right, Dons. Sorry I got cut off before, so I wanted to just run through this really quickly with you. So we read the background for the Father's Lament. And remember, as I said before, I think we can really use the Father's Lament to understand the ending of Beowulf and for you to cultivate um, how you interpret um, the final movements of this epic. So, as we talked about in class, um, there's this situation where Higelac, who is King Hrethel, who is the king before Higelac, um, has a situation where his oldest son, Heribald, this guy, is killed accidentally by an errant arrow by his brother, his youngest brother, or younger brother, Haethcyn. Um, and the quote that we ended at the end of class was, "For who could avenge the prince's life or pay his death price?" And obviously that's a somewhat of a rhetorical question, but what that's really reflecting on is in this sort of ethical context of either eye for an eye justice, or the notion of Vergild, or man price. How does that work when the king needs to mitigate the situation between his two siblings, right? Or his two children, one child killing the other. And I think the answer to that question, who could avenge the prince's life or pay his death price, is no one can. I don't think that system of justice really allows for that, right? Because either Hrethel would be forced to take the life of his middle son, and leaving only one heir to his throne left, which would be challenging in a lot of different ways, or pay himself the Vergild for his son, which would be no paying because he'd be paying himself. Now, the Father's Lament attempts to explore, which is the next section starting at 2444, attempts to explore that dynamic. So the Father's Lament starts off with, when it says, "It was like the misery endured by an old man." This first line right here. When we read that, the "it" is referring to this situation that Hrethel found himself in. So the situation that Hrethel finds himself in is similar to an old man who has lived to see his son's body swing on the gallows. And the Father's Lament reflects on the powerlessness that the father has, that sort of like trappedness of no matter what he would try to do to resolve that situation, to mitigate it, to bring about justice, he will never be able to fully do that. And so the Father's Lament tracks as this father watches his son, watches this raven, right, this symbol of death that like hangs around, is like waiting for the son to take his last breath so that he can come and clean up the mess, so to speak. He knows, as in the father knows, that he can be of no help. Right? His wisdom doesn't matter. All that he has is he's sad, right? If you notice, if you go a little bit further down here, right, what's left, right, his sorrow leaves his banquet hall bereft or absent of delight. The windswept hearthstone, the horsemen are sleeping, warriors underground. What was is no more. What I think, if you reflect on that and you juxtapose that sentiment and that image with the image that the nameless bearer of that treasure hoard that the dragon eventually obtains, this imagery is incredibly similar to that sort of absence of substance, that the substance has kind of left the situation. No tunes from the harp, nor cheer raised in the yard. And this last line, I think, just really stands out to me right here. This "everything seems too large, the steadings in the field." A really good, I think, representation of that feeling of unhappiness, that feeling of depression, right? That it's hard to pull yourself out from underneath that burden, or that sadness. Now, why do I think this situation matters? Why the Father's Lament helps us understand the ending of Beowulf? Well, I think it provides a frame for two ways of understanding the end of Beowulf. So if you imagine the father watching his son as being a symbolic representation of Wiglaf, the sun would represent Beowulf, right? And as we get to the end of this epic, after Beowulf is injured and then killed by the dragon, Wiglaf berates the shirkers of their duties, and he says, we've made this bed. Our enemies are going to come, and they're going to invade our country, right? We've seen the best, and there's nothing we can do to prevent them from coming to attack us. And I think we see some similar, some analogous situations between the father and Wiglaf and the hanging son and Beowulf. That's one way. Another way that we can explore this dynamic is if you affiliate or associate the grieving father with Beowulf. Within that framework, that would leave the hanging son to be Beowulf's kingdom, right? This kingdom that he's reigned over, the land of the Geats, that he's been reigning for over the last 50 years. And I think if we think about it in that way, we're able to start reflecting on some of the challenges and some of the negative attributes that Beowulf carries into this final battle with the dragon. So I would argue that and there's evidence in the text that would I think support this. I'm not going to go there now because you guys aren't going to listen to that long of a video, but I think there's evidence in the text that supports that Beowulf himself was a little uncertain if he was going to be successful in this battle against the dragon. He seems a little anxious, a little worried in a way against Grendel and against Grendel's mother we did not see at all. And I think because of that, that would somewhat indicate to us that Beowulf thinks that he might actually lose. And I think he knows that if he loses, he will be dying, right? And he will be leaving his kingdom unprotected and for at least some period of time unkinged. And I think that's really, really, really significant if you view it in that sort of way. Now, as we've had discussions in other classes, with any symbolic representation with any sort of symbol in the text, we can explore many other ways that text or that symbol, we can explore the many ways that symbol relates to the text. So I encourage you to follow your instincts and your own interpretation, and if there's another way that this goes, or another way that you can see this fitting into the narrative, into the end of Beowulf, say go for it. So I hope this helps a little bit. I hope you reread the Father's Lament and are able to get a deeper understanding of how it relates to the end of Beowulf. Cool. Have a good night. Peace.